Hey guys, I hope everyone's having a great day. I really enjoyed making that video yesterday. There was a deep dive on all these funds, especially FEPI. And I know FEPI has a lot of fans out there. This morning I got a comment on one of the Discords I belong to, and I want to answer it, but the answer was too involved to put in Discord, so I decided to turn it into its own video. The comment said, the big difference between FEPI and Yield Max, Defiance, and Curve is that FEPI holds the actual shares of the companies in the index instead of using synthetic covered calls. To me, that would indicate that FEPI would participate in all of the upside, but still have the slight downside protection of the covered call income. This is a great question. Stick around for a minute and we're going to get right into the middle of it. I get this comment all the time that the funds that hold the underlying shares instead of doing a synthetic can realize full upside, whereas a synthetic keeps you from doing that. It's a misnomer, but I'm glad I got this question, and I'm glad I'm turning it into a video, and I'll show it to you. But the too long don't read is there's no difference between the synthetic covered call strategy and owning the shares. No economic difference. As far as being a trader, when you own the shares, you can have the stock called away from you, and you have to cover and roll out, or you have to buy new stock. Sometimes it happens right before the company pays a dividend. That's happened to me before. So from a trading standpoint, yes, different things can happen. From an economic standpoint, if one strategy makes $1,000, the other strategy makes $1,000. The profit loss graph is virtually identical. Like I say, there are some differences. When you own the shares, you get the dividend, okay? The reason FEPI it doesn't mind, the reason Yield Max, likes to go ahead and do the synthetic strategy is most of the stocks that Yield Max covers don't pay a dividend anyway, so you aren't really sacrificing anything with doing a synthetic strategy. The reason FEPI likes to do it, there are good reasons to own the shares. The profit loss graph is not one of them, but there are good reasons. When you own the shares, you can sell. What FEPI does is they sell options on the stock itself. So like they own AMD, they're going to sell AMD call options. Well, AMD call options trade at about a 50 volatility, a 50 implied volatility. If a fund like QQQY, they own AMD also through exposure in the short puts to the NASDAQ index. They own AMD also, but they sell puts on the index. The index puts trade at a vol of about 20. So you can get a lot more premium selling the calls on the individual stocks. Like I say, and that creates other problems because you can also get the stocks called away from you, and then you have to do stuff to avoid that or to allow for that. But there are good reasons to own the shares, and FEPI is a good company, and it's a good fund. I'm not dogging FEPI at all, not even in the slightest. The point of my video yesterday was there's really not much difference between these strategies other than the main difference is the underlying. FEPI owns something for its underlying called the Selective FANG Innovation Index. And it's a great index. And as long as that index keeps doing well, and if that index outperforms the NASDAQ 100 index, yes, then FEPI will still do great. There's nothing wrong with picking an ETF that has underlines you believe in. And I wasn't saying that at all, but I'm saying mechanically, the ones that sell puts versus the ones that sell calls, there's very little difference unless one of them does in the money and one of them does out of the money, or none of them do in the money actually. Some of them do in the money, or they all do out of the money except for Global X, which does at the money. None of them do in the money. Now, before I get a comment, yes, QQQY does an in the money put, but an in the money put is synthetically the same thing as an out of the money covered call. The put funds are just covered call funds. That's all they are. They're just another version of the buy right type fund, and these funds have been around since the 80s. All right, let's look into some of the specifics. I love this question, though. There's few things I like to talk about more than synthetics. All right, so let's review a synthetic. The way you make a synthetic is you buy an at-the-money call and you sell an at-the-money put. The beauty about this is generally an at-the-money call and a at-the-money put are about the same. Let's say they're both $10. Well, when you buy the $10 call, you're having to pay theta decay. When you buy an option, the options decay when you buy them. Okay. Well, when you sell the put, and if you sell it for the same price, the theta that you're earning from selling the put offsets the theta that you're paying for buying the call. So when done right, you can totally eliminate theta decay. You have an option position, but yet you have no theta decay. There's most option trades, you're exposed to theta decay. The way a lot of people do these covered call strategies is what's called a poor man covered call, where they buy one option, usually an in-the-money option for a few months out, and then they sell an out-of-the-money option for like a week or two out. Okay, when you do that strategy, it's a great strategy, but you're exposing yourself to the theta from the call you bought. But when you do a synthetic, you buy one, you buy the call and sell the put, the Greeks or the theta cancels itself out, in theory. Now, to the extent that the call costs more than the put, that will cut into your profit a little bit. Sometimes the call might cost 10.5 and the put might go for 10 or something. And yes, you'll make $50 less than just owning the shares. There's a slight difference sometimes, but you don't get all the upside when you buy the stock versus doing the synthetic. Mathematically, it is exactly the same. I'm going to show you some examples. Let's go look at the option profit calculator here. All right, I put a few scenarios in here. I just did it for AMD. I think AMD is a good underlying to look at. So this right here is just what a synthetic is. And right here, the top line means you buy it if it's over the thing. And so in this example, they bought the 170 call for February 16th. This is the way I would do a synthetic if I was the FEPI managers, or, well, not FEPI, because FEPI uses shares. If I was the yield max managers running a synthetic on AMDY, I would do it like this. I would buy an at-the-money call and sell an at-the-money put for about 1 month out. That gives me 1 month of exposure to the stock. It's the same thing as owning the stock from an economic standpoint. But let's look at this. Let's look at the fills. So they would have had to buy this call for $8.95, and then they would have to sell the put for $10.35. In this case, it looks like they can put the trade on for a small credit. Sometimes the synthetic can actually work out a little better than buying the stock, but in any event, it's generally pretty close. Okay, so it looks like the stock's moved a little bit since I set this up. We can try a different strike. Okay, at the 167.5 strike, the call that you would have to buy cost $10.10. The put you could sell for $8.95. And that's more typical of a synthetic. Sometimes you have to put them on at a little bit of a debit. You pay a little bit more for the call than you are able to sell the put for. But in any event, if you want to look at the profit and loss graph, if you had the shares of AMD and the shares moved up 10 points, you would expect $1,000, right? Well, let's go up 10 points. So we're at 168, it looks like, or 167.93. So we'll go to 177.93. All right, 177.93, and there you have it. You made $994.43. So, and if you had the shares, you would make $1,000. The difference is, like I say, little amounts of difference between how much you're able to sell the call and buy the put for. In any event, so this is a synthetic strategy. You could also do a synthetic short by just reversing these. If you bought a put and sold the call, watch this. Synthetic short future. You can do the same thing, but you can buy the put and sell the call. Same thing. If the stock drops 10 points, you're going to make $1,000. The stock goes up 10 points because you're short. In this case, you're going to lose $1,000. So synthetics are very useful. A lot of people use these in retirement accounts. They won't let you short in a retirement account, but you can do a synthetic short. You can buy a put and sell a call, and then you have the effect of being short. There's other reasons to do this. You can do this for tax planning and for other reasons that I won't get into now, but the synthetic is a really handy trade. Okay, so we've gone over, let's go back to the synthetic long. All right, so here's our synthetic long. All right, so now I did another window, and what I did, this is the yield max type strategy. They use weekly options instead of monthly, but forget about that. It's the same strategy. So what this strategy is comprised of is the same options we just saw in the other one. That they bought the 167.5 call. Remember, they paid, what, 10 for that? And then they sold this one for 9 or something. Okay. So that's the synthetic. Those two options are the synthetic. To make the covered call portion of it, all they need is a short call. They always do an out-of-the-money call. So I picked the 182.5. They have different methods to choose how far out of the money they go, but they usually go out of the money a little bit. All right. In this case, I'm going to choose 182.5 just to demonstrate. So they can bring in $4.75 for this option. All right. Well, that's great. So let's see what would happen in this case if the market goes up, say 10%. Okay, they would make $18.35. If the market goes down 10%, what would this position? This position would be down $1,300. Okay, the difference is because it's a theta positive. You're bringing in some income, and you have the odds in your favor. Is why you can make a little bit more than you can lose. That's the whole idea of selling options. But anyway, now let's go to this window. This right here is the same trade, except instead of using the synthetic, we just used 100 shares of stock. So this calculator has 100 shares of stock, and then it has one call. So this is the covered call strategy with shares. This is the way FEPI would do it. So let's look at the FEPI strategy. If it's up 10%, they make $19.22. If it's down 10%, they lose $12.09. Now let's go back to the strategy with the synthetics. On the synthetics, up 10%, they make $18.35. Down 10%. You can see it's going to work out the same. That's the same. It's exactly the same. The synthetic does exactly the same. And you can tell that it has full upside by looking at just the synthetic by itself. The synthetic by itself is the same thing as owning stock. It doesn't matter how high it goes. It goes up 85%. They'll make $14,000. Same thing with the stock. It's exactly the same trade. Okay, but here's something, and this person did not ask this question, but I always like to show this. A short put, a naked short put that's in the money is the same thing as a covered call strategy. So I took AMD and I did a naked short put. This is no stock. There's no stock up here. There's one option. It's a naked short in the money put. And to the extent that I use the same put, this right here in the same expiration date, February 16th, 182.5 short, naked. This put is naked. It's the same exact thing. Watch, if it goes up 10%, make $18.35. If it goes down 10%, it's the same. I could show you all day long. Lose $1,300. This is where a lot of people think QQQY doesn't have an underline. Well, they do. Their underline is the put. They sell it every day, so they have daily direct exposure to the underlying. They have daily direct capped upside exposure to the underlying, but that's the same kind of exposure you get when you run either synthetic or or just with having the stock. I guess here's having the stock, and here's the synthetic. So QQQY does have an underline. It's just in the same way. If you want to be able to say that the yield max funds have an underline, because through the synthetic, even though, and I know it's complex, but even though there is no synthetic, the single short naked put does the same thing that you need 3 options to do right here with the synthetic strategy. There you have 3 options: long call, short put, and short call. Same thing exactly as one naked put. Isn't that amazing? I just love that. So I remember the first time my dad explained to me about naked puts, And he said it's the same thing as owning the stock, and I had to think about it. Or it's the same risk as owning the stock. And I had to think about it for a second, but it is. It's the same risk as owning the stock with a covered call on top of it. You know, here's the stock with the covered call, or here's the stock, 100 shares of stock, short call, same exact thing. Like I said, it took me like 5 minutes to wrap my head around it and to think about it. Puts are in reverse, for one thing. And for another thing, then you're selling the put. So then you have to reverse again the way it functions. And it is a very nuanced subject. But I have always been fascinated with synthetics. Synthetics give you a lot of flexibility. Like I say, it's a first world problem to want to short a company, and maybe your broker doesn't have any shares available to loan you. They have to loan you shares when you short. You just can't short shares that aren't there, from what I understand. I've never done this. I've read this in a book. I've never shorted shares. I'm a permeable. And if I did want to short a share, I wouldn't short the share. I'd just go out there, buy a put, and sell a call. You know, I mean, that's what I know how to do. The reason that but there is a reason that they do the covered put funds, or I'm sorry, they do the naked put funds on Defiance, because Defiance uses indexes. In index options, puts always trade expensive relative to the calls. There's always put skew because people use index options to hedge portfolios with. So there's more demand for puts and less demand for calls. In individual options, like what YieldMax does or what FEPI's doing, there is, in individual stocks like Tesla, there's way more demand for calls than puts. So calls trade expensive. So that's why it does make sense, even though it's more complicated and you have to do 3 options to do the same thing with the single stock, that you have to do 3 options right there to do the same thing with the single stock that you can do with one put. It does make sense from an economic standpoint when you're doing it on indexes, because the puts are more expensive. Just to make this example easy, I just showed what a short put, a naked put strategy would look like on AMD, just to show you it's the same thing. But it's all the same thing. Like I said, I really appreciate this letter. I love a chance to talk about synthetics. I was going to make a video on synthetics one time, but I thought it was too in the weeds. Now, let's see what else I didn't cover. I'm sure I left some stuff out. Okay, and I've covered these already, but the synthetic is useful when your broker won't let you short a stock, or, you know, it's in a retirement account and you can't reshort, you know, you can't short in a retirement account. Let's say you work for Tesla and you have a bunch of stock options, but you heard something that's going on at the company. You don't want to sell your stock options. For one thing, it'd be way too much taxes, is the main thing. And for another thing, if you're an officer in the company, you would have to report it. You know, I think this may get around reporting as well. But let's say that because it's a retirement account, they won't let you short the shares, but you know something's bad is coming out and you want a month or two's worth of protection. Okay, well, you just go buy a synthetic. You just go buy a Tesla short synthetic, and then you're covered. You don't have to report it. If you're an officer, you know, it gets around it gets around actually selling the stock, where you would have to pay a big capital gains tax. When you work at a company, they give you the shares at a drastically discounted price, especially if you've worked at Tesla in a long time. People that have worked there 5 years, probably virtually all of the price of the stock is profit to them. They probably got this stock at $5 a share through their stock options. So this is when you would really want to do it in a retirement account. I love options for retirement accounts. I'm going to do some more. There's a lot of other things that it's useful for in retirement accounts besides just this one little thing. I'm going to do some more content on that. So it is useful for running a covered call strategy in an ETF. That's what YieldMax does. Here's the way I would do it, and here's the way a private trader would do it. YieldMax doesn't do it this way because they don't want the stigma of using margin. But if you notice on the option profit calculator, you can do a synthetic right here, and they just charge you $3,200 margin, even though you're controlling 100 shares of stock. So your max loss is $16.95 or $16,950. right? But they only charge you $3,200 to hold the position. So what a private trader would do is they would put this on in margin, and then they would sell the covered call. They would do this strategy in margin, and their covered call profits would look margin's about 25% right now. Their covered call profits, it would magnify the covered call profits. It would also magnify the losses. We all know margin's not the be all and end all, but I'm saying that's the way I would do it. I would also use it for a more efficient use of cash. I would keep 75% of my money in my pocket, buy treasuries with it, or maybe diversify with it. I don't even know, but you could also do this in a way more tax efficient manner than the funds have done it in. So that was another idea I had on how that might be useful. A lot of you guys are better option traders than me or have more experience. I've been doing it a long time, but I also didn't do it for about 20 years. If I'm missing something, or there's probably other ways that this is useful that I'm not thinking of. You know, my knowledge from 2000 to 2017 is non-existent. I have a lot of 90s knowledge and a lot of knowledge from the past 5 years. So now just to prove it that I'm not just some crazy guy that just loves options, and that is kind of what I do and what I am, but let's look at the prospectus and see what the prospectus says about it. Okay, because they disclaim it 3 or 4 times. They write in here they won't get all the upside. I wish they would. I wish that the comment was right and that FEPI did find a magic way to get all the upside and the other funds are missing out on it, but it's just not so. Okay, it said, so I underlined this. Since the fund receives a premium from the purchaser of the option, the fund partially offsets the effect of a price decline in the underlying security. At the same time, because the fund must be prepared to deliver the underlying security, they can get their security called away in return for the strike price. Even if its current value is greater, the fund gives up some ability to participate in the underlying security's price increase. And they say it again in a different way. They say the fund employs an investment strategy that includes the sale of call option contracts, which limits the degree to which the fund will participate in increases in value experienced by the index over the call period. That means that if the individual stocks comprising the index experience an increase in value above the strike price of the sold call options during the call period, the fund will likely not experience that increase to the same extent and may significantly underperform the individual stocks comprising the index. If you looked at the disclaimers for the free yield max, it says all this same stuff. This is all boilerplate. I was just trying to back up what I said. And I thought this was interesting because I get this question a lot too. Well, if the market goes into these funds are actively managed. So if the market goes into a downtrend, why don't they just buy puts, or why don't they do something to so they don't get killed on the downtrend? None of them do that. That's not this strategy. These covered call strategies and short put strategies, these are premium collecting strategies. All they're doing is trying to collect the extrinsic premium on a daily basis. And I always tell that to people, but this backs it up. This is where they say it in the prospectus. And the other prospectuses say this too, but I'm just going to show you this one from FEPI. They say the fund seeks to employ its investment strategy regardless of whether there are periods of adverse market, economic, or other conditions, and will not seek to take temporary defensive positions during such periods. Once again, I'm not arguing with the people that want them to do that. That would be nice, but that's just not the way that's not these funds' gigs. That's just not what they do. All right. Remember, it's not investment advice, fun and entertainment only. Lots of times I miss stuff or say stuff wrong or something, and I read all my comments, and I try to respond to most of them too, but I read them all. So if I got something wrong or something, of course, please let me know, and I'd love to discuss this stuff. A lot of you guys are in Discord with me, so we talk in there, I'm sure, as well. But like I say, I love to do this, so let me know if I missed anything or if I'm overly excited about anything, because it does happen. Guys, you have a wonderful day.